What's up mga ka-investa? So nakita at narinig namin ang mga request nyo na i-cover ng Investa team ang DD Reit. So nandito ulit ako kasama ang ating kaibigang investment banker and research analyst na si Ray. Ray, good afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon, JC. Glad to be back. Another IPO this time, no? So, kakatuwa nga, first IPO of 2021 kay Injap. Last year, Merrimart kay Injap din.
Oo.
Then yung Double Dragon 2014, Injap din yung first IPO. So, mahilig talaga siya first IPO of the year, no? So, let's see anong magiging evaluation natin for this one.
Tama. Tsaka isa sa mga inaantabayanan ng tao to kapag nakatatak yung pangalan ni Mr. Injap. Parang inaantabayanan na kasi because of his track record. So game, Ray, simulan na natin.
Sige, so share natin yung presentation natin. So this is for DDMP Reit Inc. So yung magiging trading symbol or ticker niya is DDMPR. So very first thing that we want to look at is nasaan ba tong DDMPR? And it's in the Manila Bay area. So this road over here, this major road is Rojas Boulevard. And then this one, of course, is EDSA leading to MOA, Mall of Asia. So maganda yung location niya, nasa intersection ng two major roads. Kaya expected natin na medyo mataas din yung property value, specifically for this property, right? So that's one advantage na right from the start. And all of its properties for DDMPR are within this area. So ito yung buildings na kasama sa initial offering niya. So you have Double Dragon Plaza, Double Dragon Center East, and Double Dragon Center West. So in total, 172 square meters, and 92% of that is office space. So yung remaining 8%, it's yung retail. So the places where yung mga workers can eat, diba? And then one thing that we noticed then is as of September 2020, mataas yung occupancy ng lahat ng buildings. So overall, 99.5% occupancy. And then another highlight for DDMPR, it also has these two assets na under construction. So the first one is Double Dragon Tower, which is expected to be completed next quarter, so Q2 2021. 40,000 square meters then, so medyo malaki compared to yung 172K na existing. So malaki rin yung upside if ever they infuse this sa REIT, diba? And then the other asset naman is Ascot DD Meridian Park. So this one is not an office. Ascot is, of course, as we know, yung hotel. So if ever they infuse this as well sa REIT, yung DDMPR, hindi na siya magiging exclusively or office REIT. It's gonna have hotel exposure as well. Expected completion naman for this is 2022. So medyo matagal pa. And then moving forward, we also see yung ownership structure ng DDMPR right now. So 70-30 siya, 70% kay Double Dragon, and then 30% kay Benedicto and Teresita Yuico, so their spouses. And then with this IPO, they're offering up to 36.67% of DDMP Reit Inc. And then excluded pa sa IPO na to right now, yung Double Dragon Tower and Ascot DD Meridian. Pero worth noting is that, yun nga, sino bang owner na tong dalawa? It's also these two groups. Sila rin, 70-30. Kaya, ayun, high expectations na whatever they want to do with it, if they want to infuse it, they can easily do so. Diba?
Yeah. Parang ginawa ni Reit, no? Nag-infuse ng mga bagong properties din.
Yep. Puro kay Ayala Land lang din naman yun before that.
Yep.
And then, let's look at the tenant profile of DDMPR. So, we see over here yung top 10 tenants niya. We see that the number one tenant is a group called Mandarin Group BPO Inc. And they're classified as a PAGCOR accredited BPO. So it's a BPO, pero primarily it's servicing mga PAGCOR related companies. So examples dyan would be POGOs, diba? So they're not exactly a POGO, pero they might be serving POGOs. So indirectly, meron ka ring POGO exposure. Top 2 mo would be Vertex Digital Entertainment. So it's one of the bigger POGOs expected. And then your next few are actually a lot of them are PAGCOR accredited BPOs. And then a few exceptions, of course, Double Dragon, they're renting their own space. And then you also have the likes of Tugo, pero it's only 4.3% of the total. So when we look at the overall mix, ito siya, 55.1% is gaming-related na BPO, and then 10.3% is an actual POGO. So this for us is And for a lot of people, actually, they see this as a major risk. Because there's been a huge crackdown on POGOs ever since like last year, maybe even late 2019. So up until now, status nito is still quite risky. So we know na may mga iba nagsialisan na. So of course, these ones are still here, pero it depends ano yung outlook natin sa industry. Are they here to stay or aalis din ba to eventually? Or dadami pa ba sila? Right? So it depends talaga.
Yeah. And this will also be dictated ng government natin. So 2022, bagong administration na yan onwards, di ba? So kailangan natin pag-isipan, i-maintain pa ba yung ganitong outlook or support sa mga Chinese companies, Chinese gaming companies, mga POGOs. So that's what we will have to see kung paano mag-manifest yung election na paparating.
Yep. That's also a good point. So ito siya. Let's list down some reasons to be bullish along with some risks to consider. So first one, and I think top of mind to ng lahat, is NJAP really has an unmatched IPO track record. And we mentioned this nga right from the start of the video na ang ganda ng performance ng Double Dragon and ng Merrimart. Pero the risk to consider with this is that itong offering na to is 14.7 billion along with yung overallotment. So it's 9 times larger versus Double Dragon and Merrimart.
Ayun.
Kaya medyo mas mabigat, di ba?
Yeah, importante to guys and gals kasi yung DD and Merrimart, IPO nila 1.2 at saka 1.4 billion lang. Tama ba, Ray?
1.2 and 1.6. Yeah.
Ayun, 1.2 and 1.6. So napakagaan nun kumpara dito, halos 10x yung tinaas. So dun pa lang sa weight and sa nature ng asset, hindi siya yung high growth company. REIT are more conservative in nature kasi dividend yields yung habol mo dito. So dun pa lang sa weight and dun sa nature nung asset na to, nung company na to, parang mas kakaiba na to versus dun sa dalawang nauna, yung DD and MM.
Yep. So ito, Double Dragon, diba? First 2 months of trading, naka 448% siya. Pero again, yung offer size niya was 1.2 billion. Yung IPO niya ng market cap was 4.5 billion. Versus naman yung offer size pa lang ng DDMPR, 14.7 or 14 point something, right? 14.7. Ito naman, Merrimart, 3 days or 4 days, sobrang lakas, diba? 350%. Pero again, sobrang liit lang din compared to DDMPR. So kahit mag-pour in ka, let's say 3 billion pesos sa Merrimart, syempre tataas ng sobra. But if you pour in the same 3 billion pesos into DDMPR, you might not get the same results.
Agree.
And then, ito rin, let's also look at something we covered in one of our previous videos sa Converge. Pinakita natin ano bang correlation or ano bang performance ng mga IPOs with respect to how big they were. So yung mga larger IPOs, A-REIT, All Home, Shell, and also Converge, within the first month, what actually happened with them was negative 5% to 16% gains. Versus, nga, mga DD, mga MM, X, sila yung umaabot ng 100+%. Kaya mas tempered for me yung expectations natin for DDMPR.
Yep. So dahil yung offering is above 10 billion, 12 billion, relatively mabigat to. So based dito sa graph natin, kagaya nung Converge, ngayon above IPO na siya. 'Di ba? Pero 1680 bago nangyari yun, it went as low as mga 15 plus, 'di ba? So ang laki nung range of opportunity mo to buy the dip rather than just rushing into it. So ayun, kapag mabigat yung IPO, we have the leeway of time to wait for stabilization, 'di ba? So kung umakyat man 'yan, based from stats, limitado, 16% or kahit 20%, hirap na 'yan in terms of probabilities. As most of the time magko-consolidate or down 5% in a 1-month time frame. So this is something we have to take note of sa mga ganito kasi pasok si DD Reit dito sa mga mabigat na IPO.
Tama. And then ito, some other reasons to be bullish. This one, DDMPR versus yung A-REIT, sinama nila yung land. So benefits niyan, of course, land, as we know, in the long term, it's supposed to appreciate in value, right? So yung price niyan, may capital appreciation component, itong si DD Reit. And then, we also know na land is a pretty stable asset. So supposedly, or one of the benefits dapat is mas stable dapat yung magiging price action ng DDMPR versus a REIT na walang land na kasama. And then we also note na yun nga, in dalawang pipeline assets nila, if i-infuse nila, that's huge potential upside. If they do it and when the time comes na they're more stable assets na rin. And then the risk to consider, as we also mentioned, Manila Bay property prices and rental rates. So we'll look into that in the next few slides. And then, yun nga, kanina sinabi natin yung POGO or PAGCOR BPO exposure. So 55% BPO and then 10% POGO. So 65% in total in that industry na. So let's look at itong Manila Bay property prices and rental rates. So ito siya. Bay Area Grade A. So this one nanggaling sa prospectus nila. We're looking at this light blue line. So we saw na from 2017 to 2019, medyo malaki yung increase niya from 750 to 1150, right? Pero nag-start siya mag-pull back towards the first half of last year. Siyempre kasi nagka-COVID, pero also nagsialisan na rin yung ibang mga POGOs according to the news. And then forecast ng Colliers is may continued pullback or slight consolidation. So hindi masyadong bullish, but also cause ayun nga, ang laki na ng run-up before that. And then looking at yung land values naman, as we mentioned a while ago, diba? Na kasama yung land sa DD REIT. So dapat mas stable or may capital appreciation component siya. And we see nga na parang 2010 to 2019, pataas lang ng pataas yung prices ng land sa Manila Bay area. But also good to note is yun nga, from 200,000 in 2016, 2017, all the way to almost 400,000 in 2019. So nag 2 times siya in a span of 2 to 3 years, and that's not typical for land values. Kaya ayun, forecast ng Colliers is also a pullback or a slight consolidation. So mahirap nga naman na nag-double ka na tapos increase pa rin na increase, especially considering that this is land.
Yep.
It's not income generating.
Tama. Tsaka this will be dictated, yun na nga, yung ito kasi heavily, tingnan mo, yung 17 papuntang 19, sobrang accelerate kasi, diba, Duterte administration, todo suporta sa mga ganyang business, mga POGO, mga Chinese initiatives and all of that. But again, we're in the latter part of the palapit na election, so baka magbago. Kung may bago ng administration, then things may differ. So we have to be aware kung ano ba yung focus ng next administration in terms of developing yung Manila Bay area. Kasi ito 400k parang BGC levels na to, tama ba?
Yun ang hindi ko masyadong sure, pero we can also check that after or to our viewers,
yeah,
diba?
Parang from what I'm aware, mga BGC levels na to So top level na to. So tama, parang may sense yung prediction ng Colliers na correction or consolidation muna.
Yep. And then another risk to consider, we're looking at rising interest rates and inflation as well. So those two kind of going hand in hand kasi nagkaka-inflation, so they have to increase rates to control that. So ito magandang chart na tingnan. This is yung 10-year treasury yield for government ng US, government debt ng US. So prior to COVID, yung average niya was from 2 to 3%. Yung average nito was around 2.3%. Pero as we know, nagka-COVID and they had to stimulate, they had to find a way to pump up the economy. So they kept printing money, diba? And what that did was it lowered rates all the way to 0.5%. So right now we're starting to see like rates starting to go back up. So imagine it went from 0.5% to 1.5% in a span of like 1/2 of a year, diba? So if it keeps going up back to its pre-COVID average, 2.3%, may room pa to go up. And what that does for DDMPR is kasi nga this is yield based. It's yield based kasi stable nga yung income niya and you don't really expect that much growth from it other than yung mga potential infusions. So as it is right now, since it's yield based, if we look at the Philippine version, yung 10-year yield natin, it's around 4%. So expect natin na since this is a riskier asset, hindi naman to government secured, they're offering it at 5.07% for 2021. and then 5.45% for 2022. So may spread dapat siya above yung 4% ng Philippine government. So if yung rates ng Philippine government umakyat to let's say 5%, we can expect na yung yield na to aakyat din to somewhere closer to 6 if not 6%, right? So that's why we consider it as a risk. Kasi ang sinasabi natin dito, if let's say from 5.45% nag-raise ng interest rates, so kailangan umakyat din to. Let's say it goes up to 6%. What that means for price is from 2.25 pesos, it goes to 2.05 pesos. So that's why we're saying na rising interest rates is a risk to consider.
Yep. So it's good to be aware of the general rates ng global pati ng Pilipinas. Simply put, kung tumataas yung rates, gaya ng sabi ni Ray, 4% ngayon, kaya attractive yung 5%. But if yung Philippines, yung global, biglang may inflation, they have to raise their rates. Kung tumaas sa 5% yung country rates, then hindi na attractive yung current price point and dividend yield ng DD REIT, 'di ba? Yung 5.07% at the IPO price na 225. So dun mangyayari yung sense na mag-abang tayo sa pullback kasi hindi na nagme-make sense on a risky asset yung current yield ng DD REIT. So ganun yung mga situation if tumaas yung rates.
And then at the same time, the converse applies na if tumaas yung price ng DD REIT, so let's say all the way, let's sabihin na natin 2.75 pesos, diba? At that rate, at that price rather, you're looking at 4.15% yield na lang. Who's going to want to buy for 4.15% yield when risk-free government securities are offering 4%? So that's one way of looking at it.
Yeah, so basically sinasabi ni Ray, ano pang sense bilhin ng DD REIT kung nasa 4.15% na yung yield, which halos kapantay niya na yung utang ng gobyerno, yung government bonds. Mas walang risk yung government bonds, 'di ba? Kasi yun, sureball na babayaran ka unless na lang talaga mag-bankrupt yung government. Pero sa lahat ng asset classes, yun na yung mga less risk or minimal yung risk natin. So doon nagkakatalo. Kaya which goes to our next view rin dito. May didiscuss ka pa ba dito, Ray?
So another way of looking at this, and one personal expectation ko na resistance would be at around a 10 or 11% gain. And the reason for that is ito expectation ng investors. 5% in year 1 and then 5.45% in year 2, diba? So if you add those two together, 10.5% more or less expectations mo. If makuha mo yun as an investor within 1 day or 1 week instead of having to wait for 2 years, wouldn't you want to sell? Parang kunin ko na yung 10.5, binigay mo na kaagad eh. I was expecting that after 2 years pa. But if you give it to me this week, okay, I'll take it and then I'll exit na, right? Like take my money and then para secured na. Wala ka ng risk sa POGO, stuff like that. So that's on yung resistance side. Now, for me personally, I'm looking at 2.5 as a strong resistance. If it breaks that, then maybe around 20, then maybe it can go up to 20%. Yun yung at that point, medyo malapit ka na sa Philippine government debt. Yung rate nun. So parang wala nang sense to go beyond that. And then, so that's yung resistance side. Sa support side naman, they said na yung net asset value, so lahat yung value ng properties nila, yung fair value ng properties, tapos bawasan mo lahat ng yung debts nila. Actually, they don't have debt, pero yung mga accounts payable, yung mga tax due nila, if ibawas mo yung mga liabilities nila, you get a net asset value of 1.97 pesos per share. So for me, that's a strong support naman. So you have yung actual fair value ng based on or parang appraised value ng mga properties nila. So parang it doesn't make sense din naman na it goes below yung appraised value. Unless one of the risks happens, let's say nagsialisan yung POGOs or there's like material negative news na nag-affect sa POGO related industry or sa mga BPOs nila, right? So that's the risk na it can go below 1.97. And then last naman that I want to point out is Double Dragon actually has preferred shares already. So if you look up DDPR, type mo sa Investa chart, you'll see yung chart ng DDPR. And yung yield ng preferred shares ni Double Dragon is at around 6.3 to 6.4% right now. And one way I'm looking at it is Double Dragon as a company. It owns Double Dragon Meridian Park, diba? It owns DDMPR. DDMPR, yung exposure niya is almost purely office lang. Double Dragon naman, it's exposed to office, plus city malls, plus Hotel 101, plus a few other hotels. So meron siyang ibang riskier assets. So pag mas risky yung assets mo, mas mataas din dapat yung yield mo. That's why Double Dragon preferred shares are trading at 6.4% yield versus itong DDMPR na they're pricing at 5.07, 5.45% yield. So what I want to point out then is, yun nga, if the price goes down to a point na you're approaching Double Dragon preferred dividend yield, that should also act as support. Kasi it doesn't make sense na magpantay yung dividend yield nila. Unless one of the risks happens then, diba? So let's say interest rates go up. So tataas din yung yield ni Double Dragon Meridian Park. Tataas din yung yield ni Double Dragon preferred shares. So yun, pwede siya mangyari. And then it could also happen na, let's say they lose one major tenant or something happens nga to the Pogo industry, both of them will be affected. Pero as it is right now, current situation lang, ayan, for me, we have support at around 1.97, call it 2 pesos per share, and then resistance at around 2.50 pesos.
Okay. So parang parang 10% dip, 10% dip range, 10% gain din. Yun naman yung resistance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, makes sense. Tsaka something to take note of talaga dito is kapag yung yield mo bumababa ka na sa 4, kunyari ito 235 pa lang to 250, 4.8 to 4.5 na lang yung interest mo. Parang ang liit na lang nung difference nun sa government bonds, 'di ba? So ba't ka pa kukuha nito? Not unless sobrang bilib ka dun sa future growth. Pero in terms of risk, hindi na siya masyado papatusin ng mga fund managers. So kaya yung view namin ni Ray, kapag umakyat to 10% plus, yan 240, 250, mas leaning na kami sa conservative side, mas maingat ka na dapat. Hindi namin siya nakikita na biglang lilipad na lang na parang basura stock.
Yep. So that's on yung risk and yung being cautious side natin, especially today's market conditions and rising interest rates. Pero there are still reasons to buy. And if we go to our recommendations.
Sige. Okay. So, sige, ito yung recommendations namin just to summarize. So, dahil in-Jap IPO to, kahit na relatively mabigat siya, andun pa rin yung flair ng pangalan ni InJap eh. So, marami pa rin excited dyan. So, kapag yung presyo above 225 on the first 1 to 2 days, expect mo may minor momentum dyan na tradable range siguro. Pero, tradable siya na 1 to 3 days. Yun yung initial IPO hype. Pero take note, yung second point natin dito, trim at 10-20% spikes. Kasi dito na pumapatak na yung dividend yield bumababa na. Lumalapit na dun sa 4% baseline natin, di ba? So ito yung 10 to 20%, yan yung price range ni Ray na 240 to 250. And then 20% naman, kung talagang bullish at mabaliw yung market, yan na yung 270 to 280 na price range. Hindi na namin nakikita na lalampas yan dyan. Considering na yield nga to, conservative asset siya na pang long term yung REIT. Hindi siya parang basura stock na lilipad na lang na super high growth. Tapos, for traders, kagaya nung nakita natin sa A-REIT, di ba? Ang call namin ni Ray dati is, antayin mo lang, mas may allowance tayo dito, hindi kailangan magmadali, which went through. Dahil pag tinignan mo si A-REIT, nag-consolidate pa siya ng halos 3 months bago niya na lampasan yung high niya nung IPO. So meron kang consolidation opportunity. So that's the same thing na okay, if you wanna trade it, believe ka kay InJap, sige, i-trade mo yung first week or first 3 days. Bahala ka na kung gusto mo mag-intraday dyan, kung short term ka. Pero as traders, wag rin tayo ma-FOMO na palagay natin iiwan tayo nito, baka mag super jackpot move to. Kasi there will always be a consolidation. Ito, maganda siya kasi nag-consolidate below the IPO price, so nakamura ka. Pero even if it consolidates above the IPO price, let's say nag-consolidate 230, 240, ganun pa rin eh. You will still have that buying opportunity in the consolidation. So our suggestion for serious capital, you could wait for 2 to 3 months, yung mga build up na 40 to 60 days to 90 days na mas seryoso. Tapos doon natin antayin kung may high volume breakout plus may catalyst. So that's it for short-term traders. Pwede siyang pilitin i-trade, pero reward natin napaka-limitado lang at relatively mabigat to. So for long-term investors, I'll leave it to Ray.
Yeah. So for long-term investors, our recommendation is to invest spare funds. So by spare funds, we're saying like less than 10% allocation. But one thing to be mindful of is there might be 2 or 3 more other REITs coming up this year. So alam ko from last year's news, at least 4 companies or at least 5 companies na yung nag-express ng interest nila. So si RLC, si Vistaland, si FLI, si Megaworld, and even si SM, all of them have at least mentioned or have at least come up sa news. So 2 or 3 of them likely mag-IPO din this year. So if you want other REITs, it's also, you don't need to put all of it here in Double Dragon and Meridian Park. And then ito, buy on dips closer to 6% yield. So ito yung approaching na this one is yung approaching na nung 1.97 NAV. So if it dips to this low, for me that's a buying opportunity. Unless it's because of Pogo related negative news. So if yung dip is driven by a negative catalyst such as yung Pogo related, doon parang I wouldn't want to buy kasi may good reason nga siya to go to 6% yield or even higher. In terms of price, may good reason siya to go to 1.97 or maybe even lower, right? Pero if wala namang ganong news, price action lang talaga, then for me that's a buying opportunity. You can add on dips.
Yeah.
And then
Saka maganda maglagay ng allowance, lalo na nakikita natin yung market ngayon. So may mga factors na tayo, 'di ba? Alam natin ito mas mabigat. Tapos interest rates nasa 4%, potentially pwedeng tumaas, hindi natin alam yung future kasi nasa end na tayo ng cycle or potential end ng low interest rate environment eh. So mas mataas yung mga risk na any kind of catalyst whether global or local may mag-trigger ng interest rate increase bigla. So kung 4% yung benchmark mo na government rate, maganda maglagay ng allowance. Parang mahirap mag-all-in or full allocation sa 5%. 1% lang yung pagitan, yung parang margin mo. Pero kung yung papasukan mo na presyo is ang yield na binibigay ay 6 to 7%, at least may safety net ka na 3%, mas malayo. So that's our notion na kung nakabili ka konti sa IPO, hindi mo kailangan maging impatient na dapat lahat ibili mo na kaagad. Kasi pwede tayong mag-antay sa mas attractive levels given yung risks na pino-point out ni Ray.
So that's on yung risk side and why we should be cautious. On the positive side naman, we do see upside for this in the longer term. So we mentioned 2 pipeline assets, yung Double Dragon Tower and yung Ascot na hotel. So watch for asset infusions for additional opportunities. And it's the same thing kasi that happened with A-REIT. Sure, yung first 3-4 months niya, medyo consolidation lang. Pero after, it infused 1 or 2 more assets. Alam ko they infused the 30th, yung sa may Ortigas, Meralco Avenue area, diba? So that's one thing that led to yung price appreciation nito. That's why it went from 25 to 35 pesos. So that could also happen with DDMPR, especially since we mentioned earlier there are 2 assets and it's the same owners, right?
Yeah.
So that's
so the key there is to either wait for the price consolidation tapos antayin mo rin yung timing kung kailan ba may infuse yung mga potential assets na idadagdag. So that goes hand in hand. That will contribute sa growth revenues nung REIT. Tapos sa price action, makikita rin natin yung confirmation yan. So as a trader or long-term investor, pwede nating timingan kung kailan tayo magdadagdag ng with conviction.
Yep. And then yung last category natin, JC.
Ayun, ito. So may third category. Yung mga in-job fanboys and fangirls. Kasi among mga CEOs, si Sir Injap yung isa sa mga respected eh. Kasi walang palya yung mga IPO niya eh. Kung bumili ka sa piso, sa dos, 'di ba? Lahat 'yun, lamang ka pa rin, profitable ka pa rin kahit volatile or minsan nagko-correct yung mga stocks niya from the IPO price itself ang layo ng profit margin, di ba? Yung recently piso, tapos nasa 4, nasa 5 ngayon, di ba? So times 5 pa rin yun. So dahil nandun na nga, na-build na yung fan base ni Mr. Injap, kung talagang tiwala tayo sa kanya, vision, long-term growth, yung character niya, reputation niya. So if we believe in that as fans, then pwede ka mag-order ng IPO allocation. Malamang naman sa retail broker natin, magra-raffle pa yan. So hindi mo naman makukuha yung buong allocation mo. So dasal-dasal na lang. But at the same time, I'd like to iterate na kung kukuha ka ng IPO, given the risks that we put into place here, make sure na less than 10% lang ng portfolio mo. Wag yung all-in. Kasi based on the factors, mas nakikita namin na hindi to kagaya ng mga previous IPO ni Injap, mas mabigat to. Tapos hindi rin siya super growth name kasi REIT siya, more of binibili siya para sa yields. So pwede tayong maging patient dito at mag-antay ng tamang dip opportunities or tamang consolidation and breakouts kung traders tayo.
Yep.
Ayun. So ikaw, Ray, ano pang final mo dito? Comments mo sa DD Reit?
Ayan. So for me, we really kept this one shorter kasi it's really just one property all within the same block. So discussions on ano yung laman ng property, stuff like that. If you really want to look up into it, ayun, you can read their prospectus. Pero for me, it's really these recommendations. And saan ba nanggaling tong recommendations na to? It's coming from, ito nga, looking at the yield with respect to price. And then of course, the reasons to be bullish as well as yung risks to consider. So nagkataon lang na medyo marami ring risk talaga to consider for this IPO. And that's one thing talaga that I'd keep in mind. That's why we're not saying na go all in Jap IPO to. No, we're saying na do it with comfortable allocation, do it with respect to risk management pa rin.
Ayun. So this will be interesting to see kasi sa lahat ng IPO ni Injap, ito yung heaviest. But let's see kung nandun pa yung brand and power ni Mr. Injap. But for us, kami ni Ray, pinakita na natin dito yung logical price levels and yung mga risks and mga potential catalysts involved. So ayun mga ka-investa, sana natulungan kayo ng video na to. And good luck sa atin lahat. Exciting to see. This is the first IPO of the year. And take note, marami pang mga REIT na paparating. And one thing to consider there is yung DD kasi relatively new player pa siya. So for more conservative investors, baka mas safe play yung iba pang mga REITs na paparating na ilalabas na mga mas stable na companies na, yung mga staple names na RLC, MEG, Vistaland, FLI, yan yung mga potential property companies eh. So we have to take into consideration that kind of reputation, diba? So pag sinabi mo Injap, exciting, growing name, pero may risk siya. Hindi pa siya super stable kung stability yung pinag-uusapan. Tapos pero kung stability yung gusto natin, nandun yung mga mas old companies na. So yun lang, parang hindi natin kailangan magmadali sobra. May consolidation, usually yung IPO nagpapahinga in the first 3 days to 1 week. So abangan lang natin and nilatag na natin yung resistances and potential supports. So good luck and Godspeed to everyone. Alright, thank you Ray, salamat. Marami tayong natulungan. Kita-kits ulit sa susunod.